Welcome to the Freethinkers Living Sober Group's workshop on Varieties of Secular Experience, Navigating AA in a Secular Way. On the last Sunday of each month, we'll have a different speaker or panel to share their experience, strength, and hope for about 30 minutes on some aspect of getting or staying or living sober in AA in a secular way. The workshops are being recorded. The audio is posted on our website and on our YouTube channel sometime after we do it. I have actually caught up, so all of them are there. We'll include links in the chat for all of the pertinent information. And the chat's going to be available for anybody to send questions or queries or whatever to the hosts until we open the whole thing up, and then I'll open the chat up to everybody for whatever purposes you prefer. The first thing we'd like to do is Don from Canada is going to read something from Bill Wilson for us. Don?
Hi, I'm Don. I'm an alcoholic, and thanks, John, for inviting me to do this. In AA, we are supposed to be bound together in the kinship of a universal suffering. Therefore, the full liberty to practice any creed or principle or therapy should be a first consideration. Hence, let us not pressure anyone with individual or even collective views. Let us instead accord to each other the respect that is due to every human being as they try to make their way towards the light. Let us always try to be inclusive rather than exclusive. Let us remember that each alcoholic among us is a member of AA, so long as they so declare.
Thank you. And thanks for the edits too. I like that. Okay, this workshop is sponsored by the Freethinkers Living Sober Group of the Verde Valley in Arizona. And as freethinkers, we aspire to open-mindedness and appreciating the sharing of others, particularly those with whom we disagree. We ask only that everyone share without attempting to dissuade or argue or disrespect anyone else or their beliefs. As a group, we are secular. That is, we don't endorse or oppose any system of belief. We don't have any quarrel with any form of religion. We also don't do any prayers at our workshops or meetings. Our only wish is to assure suffering alcoholics they can find sobriety in AA without having to accept anyone else's belief or deny their own. After the speaker, we'll have open sharing and the chat will be open for about an hour. We ask that you keep your microphone muted unless it's your turn to share, and please use the raised hand function so we can call on people in the order they raise their hands. You're welcome at that point to ask questions of the speaker or share your own perspective and experience on the topic or any topics that might come up. If you're new or return to AA in secular AA and Zoom, we'd love to hear from you too. Again, remember this is being recorded, so keep anonymity in mind. We will have a timer going so as many people as possible can share. And after 3 minutes, I'll do this, and that just means start to wrap it up. And it's now my distinct honor and privilege to introduce our speaker today. He's well known by most of us because of his active involvement in secular AA for a long time, and because of his Friday night podcasts. I'm usually working on Friday nights, so I have to listen to the recordings. He's also very important help in our emotional sobriety workshops, by the way. He did a lot of the back end help with that. He's interviewed and knows lots of folks involved in secular AA, so I'm sure his perspective will be really enlightening. And I really thank you for being here, John. It's all yours.
Thank you, John. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me here. First of all, I want to let you know that I'm not an expert in anything at all, and I'm not here to share opinions. I'm here to share my experience, and my experience in AA is something that has evolved over the last 33 years. The experience, I guess, is the same, but the way that I understand it and relate it to other people changes all the time. So anything that I say today, I might feel differently by tomorrow next week. Okay. But I'm just going to share with you where I am at this moment in time in my life. Um, I understand the topic is varieties of secular experience, navigating AA in a secular way. So I'm going to do that by just sharing with you from my own personal experience as a secular person in AA, what I've learned from that experience and what I've learned from other people. The first thing I want to talk about is the initial discomfort that I had with the God stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, I didn't grow up in a religious home. My parents were Baptist. The first 5 years of my life, we were involved in the Baptist church. I went to a Baptist kindergarten. My father taught Sunday school. And when I was 5 years old, he went to Vietnam. So this is 1968. And when he came back, a lot of things changed. And one of those things that changed is he stopped teaching Sunday school and we stopped going to church. Which was okay with me. But I knew nothing about religion. I had no clue. I had no education. I, honest to God, as a kid, didn't know the difference between a Catholic and a Protestant, and if I was one or the other. I had to ask. It got kind of embarrassing as I got older because a lot of literature has biblical references and so forth, you know, and I didn't know Peter or Paul, or I knew nothing. But my parents let us find our own way. And during the late 60s and early 70s, there were some kids went into drugs and some did drugs and Jesus. And my older siblings did the drugs and Jesus thing. And it kind of scared me. The way that they were describing religion kind of scared me. And I just never could buy into it. And I just always felt like it wasn't something that I could relate to. So when I got to AA and I saw God all over the place, it just felt to me like that was one more place where I wouldn't fit in. And it did bother me, and it surprised me, and it shocked me, and it disappointed me. Before that, all I knew about AA is what I saw in the movies and television, and I never remember them saying the Lord's Prayer or talking about God or anything like that. So that was a real surprise to me. I also had an aunt, not really a real aunt, but someone who I loved very much, who was a AA member. And I just thought so much of her. So I had a lot of respect for AA and thought it was a place I could go to for help. And you know what? It was. Fortunately for me, the first group that I went to, they really worked hard to downplay the God stuff. I actually did get the old, you can use a doorknob as a higher power talk at my first meeting. But the whole idea was that don't worry about this stuff. The main thing is don't drink and go to meetings, find some people that support you. You know, they were very gentle with me. It was a mixed group, men and women, and mostly professional people. It was a downtown group in Kansas City, Missouri. But they did encourage me to go to an all men's group. And I don't know why they did that, but there was some good and bad that came out of that. The good is that there were a lot of young guys my age in their 20s or early 30s who were getting sober, and they became my friends. And this was a different experience for me to relate with other guys on a level that I had never done previously, so that we could be honest and open with each other about how we felt about things, our fears, our insecurities. It was really a nice thing. We were very close. And I think that hanging out with these guys helped me stay sober more than anything that I heard in those AA meetings. And it just was really important to me. So I'm very lucky that that happened. On the bad side of the ledger of going to this men's group is that I grew up in a military family. My father was very authoritative, and I knew how to take orders from guys. And I knew how, as a military kid, I knew how to make myself fit in and speak the language of whatever culture I was in. So there were a lot of older guys in this group who kind of reminded me of my dad in their authoritative manner. And so if they said that I should be doing something a certain way, yes, sir, I'll do it. So that was kind of the way that I was thinking, I guess, at that time. But as I went to this men's group, and I heard a lot of the God stuff. And this group was big on the big book and praying and all this stuff. But one thing that I got from it is I learned how to immediately kind of rationalize what I was hearing. And there are a lot of things I heard there that I liked. An entire psychic change made sense to me. A practical program of action made sense to me. Changing my behaviors and making amends made sense to me. Learning to calm my racing mind was helpful to me. And using the group as a power greater than myself was helpful to me. And all of those were concepts that I held close and dear without really thinking about it, I guess, in the front of my brain or whatever. But I would hear those things even through the people who were talking the God talk. And I could somehow just kind of make it kind of work in my head. But don't we all, whether you believe in God or not, if you're sitting in an A meeting and you read something, you read the steps, or you listen to somebody in a meeting, I think we all have to process it in our own way in our brains. And we just do it kind of automatically without even thinking about it. And we kind of put it in a way that makes sense to us. And I did that on the inside, but on the outside, I knew how to speak the AA language now. And so I did it very well. And this group read the big book over and over and over and over. And I did too. So I knew how to like pick little snippets out of the book and say things that makes everybody's head go up and down. And I was real popular and well liked. Like he knows that book. So that's what I did for quite some time. There was a certain dogmatism at that time that impacted me. And what I find interesting is, from my perspective, the dogmatists were really the minority of the people in these traditional meetings, but they were the loudest voices. And they were the ones that were the most sure. And they were the ones that weren't afraid to tell me what was best for me. So the dogmatic minority, they would stress sponsorship. Often I would hear bad things about atheists, like they feel sorry for atheists, or they're the most unhappy people they've ever known, things like that. The big book had answers for everything. And I didn't have to worry about being depressed or seeing a doctor about it, because I'm just a self-centered alcoholic and all I need to do is pray. And those are things that I heard from the dogmatists. The dogmatists, these few people who would get me in the corner and talk to me after the meeting, they were the ones who kind of made me believe that I couldn't really trust my own thinking because I was just so messed up. But there was also, at the same time, a quiet majority of voices of moderation. And these are the people who said, don't drink and go to meetings. At the men's group I went to, they would often say, do your best and fuck the rest. Don't worry about the steps for now, and the steps will work you. And that was nice. Those words from the moderates were always part of me and comforted me. And I think I always kind of hung on to them, but I gravitated towards the dogmatist. And I've noticed this later on, when I started a secular group, that there are even people, I wouldn't call them dogmatists maybe, but there are people even in secular AA meetings who kind of think there's a certain way you should do things. And as a newcomer, I wanted that. I wanted that structure. I wanted someone to tell me just the right way to do something. And I wanted to do that. I knew how to do things that people told me to do. And if you just gave me free rein to find my own way, I didn't understand that. I had to be given orders and follow orders. So that's why I kind of gravitated towards the dogmatist. I wanted to do things right. I craved that structure, and that I knew how to relate to people as they are the one in authority, and I'm the one who takes their wisdom and do what they say I should be doing. So that's what I did for a long time. For one thing at that group that was really important is what they called the drill. And the drill was that you start your day on your knees and you ask God to give you a day of sobriety. You go to a meeting, you call your sponsor, and you end the day on your knees and you thank God for that day of sobriety. and the drill was talked about a lot. The ones that were really emphatic about it, I mean, that they really got through to me. And so even people that weren't doing the drill, I'm sure they would be afraid to say they weren't doing it, but I did it for 10 years. And then after 10 years of sobriety, when I was like 35 years old, my father died unexpectedly. And I moved to a different phase of life and development. And what happened is I always compared myself to my father, and I looked at myself at the age of 35 and compared myself to where he was at the age of 35. And I just didn't match up at all. And I felt like even with 10 years of sobriety, that I just wasn't successful in life. So I was determined to change things. So I started spending more time outside of the rooms of AA, and I went to school, went to college, got a degree. I started dating. I ended up getting married, bought a house, and I learned during this time, I ended up getting 2 degrees, and I learned to think a little bit more critically about things. And I wasn't really intentionally rethinking AA, but gradually over a period of time, I began to have doubts about some of the things that I heard. And I was beginning to consider that I was more of an atheist, and finally came to the conclusion that I was. And this was really over a long period of time. And oh yeah, when I wasn't doing the drill, I wasn't telling anybody I wasn't doing the drill. I wasn't telling anybody about these ideas that I had and this new way of thinking that I had. But I finally, was getting increasingly uncomfortable with the group that I was going to. And it was the same group I've been going to for 25 years. And I felt like I had to walk on eggshells because I as an atheist, I couldn't buy a lot of stuff that I was hearing. And I also learned about these agnostic groups that are all over the world now. And were at that time, this is 2014. And because I was becoming increasingly uncomfortable, I finally came out as an atheist. And when I did that, I got a lot of pushback. I got a lot of correction. In one instance, I would consider it harassment, just being kind of stared down at the Lord's Prayer. I was just very, very uncomfortable. So I got happened to be another atheist in that group, and we started the We Agnostics group in Kansas City. And that changed everything for me. That was in August of 2014 that we had our first meeting. And I learned a lot from that. But during those early days of starting that group, what I learned is that the early days, the people that we were getting to our group were people who were older. They had experienced AA previously in their life, but they left because they couldn't handle the religious stuff. And when they learned that there was a secular meeting, and they learned about us because we were listed at our Kansas City Central office and also on our own website, they came to our meeting relieved that they could feel free to speak openly, as an atheist without people grabbing them in the corner or whatever. Well, what was that group, that initial group was very similar to me in experience. And we all really didn't have a problem with the 12 steps. We really didn't have a problem with the big book. We could interpret it and stuff like that. We were okay with AA as long as people weren't pushing God on us. And we were very comfortable with each other. But we were, even though we were atheist and secular in our view, and we were speaking about the program in secular terms, we were otherwise pretty much, I think, in line with any other group. I mean, if anybody came to our meeting, I don't think that you would know anything different other than we didn't open and close with a Lord's Prayer. Now, we weren't talking about the big book or stuff like that, but we were still, like any AA meeting. Well, over time, we started getting people who had never been to an AA meeting before until they came to ours. We had people who, unlike me when I was a kid, already knew that AA was religious and not for them. So they were seeking a secular alternative. These people didn't read the big book or care to read the big book. And they also, some of them were quite frankly offended by the wording of the original 12 steps. We did use alternative literature in our group, and they liked that. One of the books that we relied on early on that was a big influence on me and other people in the group was Mario Hornbacher's book, Waiting, A Non-Believer's Higher Power. And we used that quite a bit. Now, at that time, this is 2014, spirituality was important to me and to a lot of the other people in the group. At the Santa Monica conference in 2014, which was a life-changing event for me, I described myself as a spiritual atheist. And I didn't really, for me, at that time, I didn't really understand how I could practice AA and not have that spiritual component. I couldn't separate the two for whatever reason. Well, then I discovered a certain podcast called Rebellion Dogs Radio. And I learned there something very interesting that I'd never really considered before. And that is there's a real difference between it's all about language. It's all how we describe what our experience is. And there's a language of recovery, and there's a language in AA. And it dawned on me that I learned how to talk that language. And I could use my experience. I could relate my whatever happened to me to some step or something. And so I would communicate with people in this way. And I could use the spiritual terminology and everything that I ever used to use in my previous life, but I now use it now. So I learned that spirituality was language. That when I go back to my early days in AA, when I was listening to those quiet voices, the practical program of action was always underneath all of that spiritual language. So for quite a while, I really had no problem with spirituality or using spiritual terms or whatever, because I could always see the practicality that underlie it all. I could always see the practical actions. I've evolved a little bit since then, though. Where I'm at today, I had an experience. This is a fairly recent thing. It's been over a period of time, but I'll share this experience with you. I was at a Zoom meeting that was in Australia, and it was an ID meeting where they share their stories. And after the end of the meeting, we were talking. Well, when we shared the experience, I shared my experience of going to my first meeting, and how I initially dealt with AA and everything. And then when I finished my share, I said, that's step 1, 2, and 3. See? Ah. And I felt very proud of myself, because in a very clever way, I described an experience and I attached the steps to it. Well, at the end of the meeting, this woman was talking, and what I said kind of bothered her. And she says, do we really have to bother with those steps? For her, she was a minister who realized she was an atheist, and she left the church. And she had a lot of trauma connected to religion. And the steps were kind of traumatizing for her. And I realized that it wasn't necessary for me to couch my experience in terms of a step. This doesn't mean I don't like the steps or value the steps. I do. But I'm more careful now to, when I share my experience, to just share my experience and try to meet people where they are. So if there's somebody for whom the 12 steps are problematic, that's fine. I can still share my experience with that person, speaking purely in practical terms about what I actually have experienced and done. But if somebody else prefers the structure of going through the steps, I'm also comfortable with that. So for me, I can live in both worlds, and it's not a problem. And my experience doing this podcast over the last 6 years is that primarily the majority of the people are the same way. Most people that I have talked to probably identify as atheist or agnostic. Most of the people that I've talked to over that period of time had use for the 12 steps, at least in principle. Some of them might not. But for the majority, it was just that it was pretty much like me, that they we're having an experience of learning about themselves over time. And it'd be really interesting to go back and talk to some of the guests from my early years to see how they see things now, because I know I've certainly have changed my view on things, you know. So yeah, so I'm just like, steps are okay, but I don't necessarily need them to explain my experience anymore. And that might be becoming more common nowadays. I don't really know for sure, but that's how it is for me anyway. Um, gosh, another thing I learned, I guess, is that everybody everybody has their own understanding of of recovery, and they have a right in AA, whether it's be a traditional meeting or not, to talk about their recovery in any way that they want to. You know, we're all free agents in AA, and we all belong to autonomous groups. And something that I find interesting is the disruption that has been caused by COVID, and how that has caused us all to re-examine and rethink things. Just the way that my disruption of my father's death caused me to re-examine and rethink things. COVID has done that, I think, for the entire world. I mean, we're rethinking the way we live, the way we work, the way we relate to work, the way that we value time. And we have reevaluated, at least I have, and some of my friends, how we relate to the recovery community or the AA community. And this is where I've experienced the most change. So I go to AA meetings occasionally. I enjoy AA meetings, and I guess I would consider myself a member of Alcoholics Anonymous, but that's not my primary identity. My primary identity is just as a person in recovery. And I could go to an AA meeting, I can go to a SMART meeting, I can go to a Life Ring meeting, or whatever. One thing that I value doing for myself personally is I got involved with people in my state, in the state of Missouri, who are peers and work in peer support at treatment centers and so forth. And they're very interested in helping people who are suffering from addiction in my state have more opportunities to be helped. And they're interested in advocating with our legislature to pass laws that would help people in recovery in my state. And the people that are doing that work are so amazing to me. They're so talented and they're so smart and they are so dedicated. And I'm just impressed. And I haven't actually done a whole lot of that myself. I get to attend these meetings though once a month with these people from different areas of my state, and we talk about different aspects of recovery. And what's cool about it is it's really secular, what we talk about. It really totally is. A lot of it is pretty similar to smart recovery, I guess, the things that we talk about. But that's kind of where I'm at now with my recovery, is I'm more into that, and my podcast. That's one good thing. I get to do the live stream every Friday with Angela, and there's always a group of regulars that join us in the chat room on YouTube. And it's kind of like an AA meeting. It's not an AA meeting, but it's kind of like an AA meeting and a party to kind of combine. We have a lot of fun, and I always look forward to it. So that's one connection that I have with people in the secular AA community today that I value. As my podcast, you know, I still continue doing episodes and interviewing people, either about their own experience as a secular person in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm also reaching out to people who are involved in other peer support groups as well. So I don't know how long I've gone. I'm not looking at the clock, but I'm going to go ahead and finish up by telling you that I feel pretty hopeful for the future when it comes to secularism and recovery. And there's a lot of reasons for that. I was talking to Joe and John a little bit before the meeting. I think that these Zoom meetings, that even though I don't attend very many of them, I think they help out a lot, because I think it gives those dogmatists that used to get me in the corner after the meeting less of an opportunity to do that. You know, it's a lot harder when you're looking at everybody on a Brady Bunch screen like this to say, hey, you come here, you need to do this. You know, you need to get on your, no, it's hard for people to do that now. So people, I think, are more free to kind of think for themselves and find their own path. And that's what's really critical for anybody in recovery, is to define their own recovery goals and to be supported in achieving those goals, however they want to do it. And that's what I think our job is in AA. You know, if we were there to stay sober and help others achieve sobriety, is to let people grow wherever they are now and help them achieve whatever goals they want in their recovery, and share about it in whatever way they see possible. And that is going to be happening more and more as we go along, because we're now connecting in a different way. We're connecting online, and that's going to continue. And also, I kind of predict, I could be wrong, but by the time the big book gets to be 100 years old, it's going to be pretty much laughable. Anyway, with that, I'll pass. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Did I go to 30 minutes?
I don't know. Pretty close.
Oh God, I went to 40.
No, it wasn't that
No,
long.
you're good, John.
You're
All right.
good. Okay, thank you very much. That's great. We're going to open up the room for sharing. So if you could use the raised hand function, I'd appreciate it. If you're on a phone, that's a *9 is what you use to do that. I don't know if we have anybody on this phone or not. And I'll call on you in order. You'll have to unmute yourself to share. If you have a question or questions for John, you can either do it that way by raising your hand, or if you want to, you can use the chat function and just and hopefully John will kind of pay attention to what's going on in the chat. So if there are any questions there, he can talk about them. I think that's about all I have to say. Yeah, so let's start off. Will.i.am, would you like to start us off?
Thank you, John. Thanks for hosting this, Joe for co-hosting, and John for that wonderful lead. I don't get to enough of your podcasts. I listen to the recordings and I really do enjoy them, and thank you for them. They are part of my recovery, and I really related to a few things you said. I like your term spiritual atheist. I consider myself that too. When I found I got sober in 2000, at the end of 2000. My sobriety date kind of sounds like an auspicious one, but not intentional, is 01/01/01. But I just did that on a New Year's to have a dry January, and went to a doctor's appointment 2 days later and confessed how much I was drinking, and that started my years of not drinking. But I did not have anything to do with AA because of what you were talking about with respect to some of the people that ended up coming to We Agnostics in Kansas City. I had predetermined, without an investigation, of course, that AA was not for me because of the God cult factor that I had heard about. I was a fully recovered Catholic and card-carrying atheist by that point, and didn't want anything to do with anything that might even smack of that. So when I got to AA 14 years, 2 months, and 11 days later, I was spiritually bankrupt. I had no concept of spirituality. I had intrinsically connected those to my religion from years past, and I had the principles of the steps, and the way you talked about, those underlying principles, even behind some of the language, that spiritual language, I could find those, and I could connect there. And that gave me an opportunity to find my spiritual essence again, which I had when I was a boy, because there was a lot of parts of being raised Catholic. I did know the difference between Catholics and Protestants. God knows there were very two sides of those streets, and nary the two should cross. But no, I had a soft spot for a lot of it. I just didn't want to have any connection with an anthropomorphized idea of a deity and supernatural, superstition. That was not going to be part of it. But finding a spiritual essence and using the principles of the steps did work for me. And I was like you in the early days, found I didn't have as many dogmatists in the meetings that I had in the traditional group I found in Cincinnati when I moved there, but did find some loving people that allowed me to find my room and space. That aside, I did find a spiritual essence to it, and I really was intrigued by what you said about the newcomers, and that you found having certain structure important to follow. I find that interesting. I've always, conversely, of course, what you said, which is something I really do believe, is meet people where they're at. And if thinking about the steps is something important to them, great. If they don't want to, I'm all for that. And I've got a couple of sponsees I'm working with on kind of that, let them find their fit basis. But what I really wanted to finish up with and commend you for, and something that I really want to do more of, is you're like a spiritual seeker. You're constantly evolving. You're constantly trying to learn more and experience more. And when you talk about Life Ring and Smart Recovery, I haven't been to any of those meetings, but I'm curious and I want to know more. I want to expand my sphere of intake, because I agree. AA has been amazing for me, and I would definitely recommend it to anyone that wanted to try to get sober, and because it's worked for me, and that's my experience. But having only one arrow in my quiver, I don't think makes me as good an ambassador for recovery as I could be. And I think that is something that you're doing. And that part about justice and legislation, I did that in Cincinnati on different bases, not with respect to addiction, but with respect to human rights and so forth. And that really appeals to me. So thank you for sharing all of that. Very, very meaningful to me. And with that, I'll share some time and pass it on. Thanks, guys.
All right, thanks. I'm trying to remember, we have a lot of people, so if you could pay attention, I'll do this when your time is up. Don from Toronto.
Yeah. Thanks, John. And John, I can relate to just about everything you were saying. I think we were on parallel paths, John. I joined traditional AA. I didn't know anything about anything other than traditional AA, and I initially tried to work I've been mostly agnostic my whole life. Not my whole life, but maybe from the time of 16. And but when I got into AA, I decided I'd give this religion thing a real shot, and I went to church and I did all sorts of things. And I got sober doing that. And so I got no regrets about it. But I also found that I couldn't really relate to any of it in terms of going to church and the Easter thing. I mean, rising from the dead and the Christmas thing and the Magi and all that crap. I never related to that. And so some things happened in the group I was in, which was a traditional group. And there were a couple of people who were thumping the Bible and the Big Book at the same time. But mostly they were pretty relaxed people. And so I found the same thing that you did. And anyway, I left that group and I ended up in another group. At the first discussion meeting, and also a traditional group, I said, basically, I'm an agnostic. And God, 3 or 4 of the other people in the room, there's only about 7 or 8 of us, said, yeah, we are too. And so that was the beginning of a whole new experience in AA, where I could be actually openly discuss things from a non-religious point of view. And it was eye-opening. A very close friend of mine, Tom C. from Ajax, founded a Freethinkers group several years ago. And I went to a couple of meetings, but they were too far out of Toronto for me. And so I ended up really differently thinking about things and just living with what I had. But Zoom changed everything. And I've been with John's group now. It's a year ago this weekend, I think, that there was the first emotional sobriety meeting, and I attended that. And the next day I showed up at my first meeting with the Freethinkers Living Sober in Arizona. And I've hung around with them ever since. I'm still with my original group. In fact, I host their Zoom meetings. And it continues on with prayers and the whole, I can live with it. It's what the hell. It's only 2 or 3 minutes of my life every week, in terms of the prayers, so it doesn't matter. And, but I have one question for you. John, you mentioned some other groups where you feel comfortable. And I've never heard of them before. So I was just wondering if you could give us a minute or two on what those are about. And that's it for me.
Just regular meetings here in my community, where they would start with the meeting with they weren't reading how it works. That didn't bother me. They would close with the Serenity Prayer, which was okay, and the meeting was usually just about a topic. And I've been to a few of those, and it was fine with me. I am sure there are a lot of meetings like that, but there's also, I'm sure, a lot of meetings that aren't like that. So.
All right, thanks. Is it Mickey or Mikey? Looks like Mickey to me.
Mikey.
Okay.
I'm Mikey and I'm an alcoholic. Thank you, John, for sharing your story and all the wonderful podcasts that I've listened to over the last couple of years. I too am in long-term recovery, and over the last couple of decades have gotten a little bit tired with some of the dogma that I hear in traditional meetings. I'd only heard of secular probably about 4 or 5 years ago, got to attend a few meetings in San Francisco on some of my visits there. Nothing local until, I guess local, probably a little over half hour's drive. I can get to a meeting. And I went to that meeting probably a week before COVID hit. And COVID hit, and I thought, well, I'll just go to my traditional meetings on Zoom, in my regular home group. But I really wasn't too interested in going to the traditional meetings. And then I found the Zoomiverse and all these secular meetings. It's really opened things up for me. So once again, thank you, John, for hosting this. Thank you, John, for sharing your story. And like I said, all the wonderful podcasts. It's opened up my eyes to the other programs that, help people towards sobriety. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Al.
Thanks, John. Thanks, John S. Great story. Big fan of especially the Friday night live stream that you guys do. Your partner, Angela B. Eloquent, smart, off the chart smart, just absolutely fantastic. And if you want to lighten up and enjoy your recovery, tune in on Friday nights. You'll get some good information and a hell of a lot of laughs. So I thoroughly recommend it. And there's 250 podcasts to choose from. If you want to click on, it's there. All good stuff. But just for me, I'll start off for a line with Bill Wilson on my time. And it's a belief in the steps or in God is not in any way requisite for AA membership. Same applies for the groups. The exact same thing. You can have groups of anarchists and can believe whatever the hell they want and call themselves an AA group. It's that simple. We don't vet what people say or who we get to talk or whatever. It's to me wide open. And that's why I love secular AA. Traditional AA to me is faith-based AA. It's as God as you understood him or understanding. And that's the whole direction of that program. Me, I'm a member, 37 years sober of AA, and pretty well just go to Zoom secular meetings. I still have friends that are longtime members of AA. I still do occasional faith-based meeting, I don't do the Lord's Prayer or any prayer. You know, I don't hold hands in a circle. It's not a requirement. You know, and I had from day one, I was like shocked when I came in the first meeting. You know, everybody's laughing, having a good time, and then I heard the opening, and I thought, they did the steps. And I went, oh my God, you know, they got 12 commandments instead of 10. You know, I was freaking out. But secular AA is great. The Cottonwood group. I'm not an official member, but yeah, I'll say I'm a member because I can. But again, John, thanks. Friday nights, I love them. Keep it up, buddy. And I know you work your hands to the bone, man. It's just you're busy all the time, and your contribution for me is just amazing. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks, Al. Hey, John, did you have something you wanted to add?
No, I think someone told me to put my hand up so that
Oh.
you could see me.
Okay. Well, how about the other John C? Would you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thought you
No,
were me.
no, you were the one I was asking.
Oh, okay.
John?
Hi, John, alcoholic.
Hey, John.
So, Judge Sheldon, thank you very much. Finally, someone else on the planet calls himself a spiritual atheist. And I've been calling myself that for more than 30 years. And of course, I get in trouble with the atheists and I get in trouble with the believers. You know, nobody seemed to like that phrase, but fully understanding. Again, you're talking about, it's all about language and words. And if you thoroughly examine the words and the language, you realize a spiritual atheism makes a lot of sense. But anyway, you know, when I first looked at the steps, I simply saw a program of action in a religious context. So when I first rewrote my steps, I just simply removed any specific belief. You know, it was belief agnostic. And then I looked at the steps and I thought, well, wait a minute, these steps here, you know, where it says a power greater than yourself as you understand it, simply can apply to anybody. It can be someone could be believing in a God, or someone like myself could be believing in a challenge to my ego is a power greater than myself. And so anyway, so I ended up calling my steps the 12 steps for all beliefs, because anybody can identify with it. Although a lot of religious people don't. When I present them, they say, "Oh no, it has to be God. It has to be God." But anyway, the 12 steps for all belief is my truth, and that's my story. I'm sticking to it. Thanks.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Kenji.
Hi there, I'm Kenji. I'm an addict and alcoholic, or as I heard somebody say the other day, unit in recovery. I like that a lot. Thanks, John. That was great, and I related to a lot of it. My dad had run away from home as a teenager and joined the Navy, and after getting kicked out of the Navy a few years later, joined the Merchant Marine and worked his way up to be a master of Liberty ships in World War II. So he also had, he was with bark orders, that probably similar to you. And although that was undercut by my mom, who was the dominant figure and tended to undercut and emasculate him all the time. So it was a pretty weird environment. Neither one of them believed in religion. We never really talked about it. It was just sort of like you, entirely just missing from my upbringing. So when I came to AA, I had no indoctrination to filter it through or overcome or anything like that. And fairly early on, I found secular AA. I got sober in LA and in 1982, and the We Agnostics group had been founded by Charlie Polachek a couple of years before that, and that became my home group. At about 6 years sober, I moved up here to the Bay Area and checked out some secular meetings here and didn't care for them. They tended to be ranting, angry atheists, and it seemed to me. although I probably didn't give them much of a chance. And I kind of settled into mainstream AA, which, while it's not Bible Belt here, it was very big book oriented. So probably a lot like you. And it's been revolutionary to have found secular AA on Zoom this last year or so. And it's been really good, and it's also been really challenging because I'm used to thinking of things in terms of steps and using the big book as a frame of reference, even though I've found my own I've learned to filter out and reinterpret the way it's written and the way the steps are written. And I still find it kind of confusing and odd that some people aren't into that stuff at all. They're at the same, and I go to a lot of meetings. By the way, I'm in my first year of continuous sobriety. I've probably been sober for 25 years out of the last 30 or 40 actually. And I'm in my 11th month of continuous sobriety now. And it's all been secular AA on Zoom. And I will probably darken the doorway of a few meetings, of regular meetings here in my city, but I don't see going back on a regular basis. I really like secular Zoom. I find it interesting that some of our sources of information, like your podcast and Staying Sober Without God by Jeffrey Munn, come from people that really are nominally AA members at this point. Like Jeffrey says that when he wrote that book, he didn't even know that secular AA existed, which seems so odd to me because we almost use it like the alternate big book now, or the alternate 12 and 12 at some of the meetings I go to. Thanks, John. And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that. Thanks.
Thanks, Kenji.
Do I have any thoughts about that? Oh, not really. I don't know. I wouldn't really, I don't know. I don't really consider myself as nominally AA. That would be really hard for me to do because I came into this program when I was 25 years old and I'm 59 now. And pretty much everybody I know who is my friend is an AA member. And every day I have interactions with AA members. I might not go to as many AA meetings as I used to do, but I still feel connected to the fellowship outside of those meetings. And I know that seems kind of weird, and it is for me too. It's something different. And a lot of that happened post-COVID, but I still consider myself very much involved. I just don't, and it would be hard for me when I feel like I grew up in AA. I just don't know how to get it out of my system. So anyway.
Thanks, John. I had a question for you. You were talking about how, the dogmatists that are, so sure about everything were the ones that kind of attracted you. And that was true for me too. In fact, one of my earliest sponsors was a Marine who was a championship kickboxer, and and he basically did AA the same way. And I kind of have been wondering, I'm sober 40 years, and the last 10 or 15 of them, I've gotten a lot looser with my interactions with people who ask me to sponsor them. And I'm wondering, maybe I'm not really all that great for somebody to have as a sponsor because, I basically just listen to what they have to say and respond with whatever experience I might have, but I don't really beat them over the head with the steps or any of that kind of thing. What do you think about that, John? Have you had that same experience?
Yes, my experience has been exactly the same. So for the most of my time, I did sponsor a lot of people, but it was, through a regimented way of doing it. And now if I were to sponsor somebody, and I don't even know if I even like the word sponsor, I'm just like you. I want to support them and be their friend and be there for them, give the best advice I guess I can, whatever. And if they want to do steps, that's fine too, whatever. But yeah, there are people I've noticed that were coming to our group when I was going to meetings prior to COVID that were attracted to the people within the secular AA group who were very focused on steps. and that's fine. I mean, no problem, but more focused on steps than I was. And that was good for I think the newcomer liked that structure, for whatever reason. And for me, they would get with me and we'd go have lunch and talk, so I'd be like the guy who used to tell me, oh, don't worry about it. Just don't drink and go to meetings. Well, that's just too freaking simple for me. So I don't know what to say about that, but I want to help people as much as I can. If they want help through however I can. But yeah, that's a thing. People like to have some sort of path to follow, I think.
Yeah. Okay. How about you, Jeb?
Oh, thanks, John. Yeah, my name is Jeb, and I'm a grateful recovered addict alcoholic.
Okay.
And we haven't talked for a couple of years now, John. So it was wonderful hearing what I consider your recovery and spiritual journey from where you were when you came in, and that's a piece that I don't often hear. As you know, and maybe others, I came in as a recovering evangelical charismatic Christian, and having worked for a number of different denominations as a musician, a religious education director. So I had a lot of stuff to flush out in order to be free to find my own path. And it was useful that I was accepted when I first came into a little bit more than 2 years of alcohol free, and began to deal with untreated alcoholism. The only thing that really changed is I wasn't drinking. And I'd found that I had the power to keep the plug in the jug, as they say. But it has been a slow process of finally getting comfortable enough with myself, even in those old-fashioned meetings, that it was in 2013, where here in Denver, I found a few other people that really wanted to have meetings where newcomers could be honest and not have to memorize things and pretend that they were doing things or believe things, that we got started here. And that's when I began to experience real freedom from the expectations of other people, uh, uh, the criticism or the rolled eyes when I would share at meetings. I stayed in those old-fashioned meetings for a long time because I thought someone had to say that you don't have to believe there is a God in order to get sober, and always talked about the third tradition and how that helped me, even in the beginning, to say, okay, I qualify and let's see if I fit. Eventually, I found that I do not fit. I don't have a sense of belonging in old-fashioned traditional AA meetings, and I had hoped, staying, for the first 35 years or so of my sobriety, that I could influence some change on the group level, the district, and so forth, but I don't have that kind of power. So it was better when we were finally able to band together with people who wanted to have at least an open mind, or try to have an open mind to other possibilities and ideas and understandings of how the steps can be applied to our lives. And that's a wonderful thing. And I guess it's probably through that I finally found that I could say I'm no longer powerless, simply because I have found the power to change things within my own life that I had never tapped into before. I found that courage and support to be my best self, and that has been just an amazing journey. And your contribution to your podcasts, and as well as Joe's, and publications that have come out through various people in the last 10 years, particularly, have just been an amazing resource and a varied resource for people to check out. We end our meeting saying, take what you can use and leave the rest. And that's pretty much the way I read the big book, the 12 and 12 grapevine articles, things, and other things, as well as current books. And I know someone mentioned a book that I don't like to promote. Will not promote, but so I will promote another one, which is the most recent one by Beth H. As we are not all egomaniacs and so forth. That is the best and most personal 12-step thing. Thank you, John. Yeah, and I hope that people will look at that. And thanks for letting me share. It's 12,000. No, it's 15,737 days, one day at a time today. Thanks for letting me share that too.
Thanks,
Yes,
Jim.
sir.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it's 14,788 days for me. So, Kat.
Hi, I'm Catherine, recovered alcoholic.
Hi, Kat.
Kat.
Hi, thank you so much, John. Boy, you got my mind going in a lot of different directions here,
Mhm.
and I really appreciate it because I guess I don't really think that often about how my journey has gone, from what I believed when I first came into AA and what I believe now. And it's been a long time for me too. I'm coming up on 3 days. I just realized I'll be 36 years sober. I think I'll make it probably. But anyway, yeah, one of the things I'm really grateful for is that nobody asked me, what is your higher power? Nobody really asked me to sit down and define that. But I would on occasion say at meetings, I'm glad nobody ever asked me, because I'm afraid I'm going to talk myself right out of this thing, and I'm not going to have a support group around me, if that makes any sense. Nice to see you, Jeb, by the way. Anyway, and so I too, like most people in the program, have found my concept of a higher power has evolved enormously. Mostly I just parroted things when I got here because I was kind of afraid if I didn't do everything everyone told me to do, I would be struck drunk or something. Like I had to read the literature and call my sponsor. And we had what they called the 5 things, which are the same things that you were mentioning, that you have to do all these things. Nobody said I had to get on my knees, but they did say I had to ask God for another day of sobriety. But at the same time, I also had a sponsor who turned out to be not the best sponsor in the world, and had switched addictions and became sicker, I think. But anyway, what she did say, though, that really struck me and stuck with me all these years is learn to trust yourself, learn to trust your gut feeling. She used to say that's your higher power, and I've since come to define my higher power as a HP, as a higher plane of consciousness. And I get to that place, or I try to stay on that place by connecting with people in the program with similar ideas. Anyway, another thing that I was thinking about a lot here is how, and I used to also, about 18 years ago, I became what I called a card carrying Buddhist. I actually joined a group, and at first I was really afraid to say that at AA meetings. I thought, what, they're going to look at me like I have 2 heads, whatever. But then I started sharing at meetings that I'm a Buddhist, and I would get criticized by some of those dogmatic folk that you mentioned, that they would say, you are, why are you trying to look different? I go, well, I want people to know that you can have different types of experiences in AA. And I'm really grateful for that. And I'll just say something real quick, that as far as sponsoring goes, I have found I've become much more relaxed and easygoing, and I kind of let each relationship determine how we're going to go with this. And that's been important to me. So thank you.
Thanks, Kat. Appreciate it. Hey, Tim, how's things in Tennessee?
Pretty good in Tennessee. It's wonderful weather. I'm Tim, an alcoholic and one of the newer people here. I've been sober less than 5 years, about 1,741 days, but I'm also, probably pretty common to this group in that I started off probably totally alienated from my religion and Christianity, and have probably kind of moved away from it. And sometimes I refer to myself as a secular Christian, which is another one of those kind of confrontational terms. It's a little bit like spiritual atheists. So if you're not careful, a certain group of people could be scurrying around looking for the nearest bag of rocks when you throw that term out. So I guess the main thing I have found in this AA program is this concept of emotional sobriety. That Cottonwood Group had the wonderful seminar, and I have become a regular member of Dr. Berger's weekly rigorous 12-step discussion of emotional sobriety. And I guess I'm kind of curious about to what degree, John, you embrace those concepts of emotional sobriety, or what the Greeks originally called ataraxia, the tranquility of the mind. To what degree, does your experience and program center around that? Is that you mentioned the two programs you have went to, like SMART program and the Life Ring. Is all of that kind of centered also around that kind of sense of emotional sobriety? And to what degree is that part of your program?
I think smart recovery is a lot different. First, I want to clarify. In 2014, I said I was a spiritual atheist. I wouldn't describe myself that way today. I try to stay away from spiritual terminology today, but that doesn't mean that I'm anti-spirituality for someone else. But I just want to kind of clarify that. As far as the emotional sobriety thing goes, I loved the emotional sobriety seminars that we had here, and I don't see. I don't see a problem with them. I don't really know what to say about that, other than I guess there's nothing about what they were saying that I would argue with. What can I say? I believe that, I guess that what I'm trying to say, I guess emotional sobriety to me just means growing as a person, continuing to grow. And I think that recovery is a process of change, and that if I'm going to be in recovery, I'm going to continue to change and grow. And I think that's part of emotional sobriety. And I need to learn how to react to what's going on in this world today. It's more than just about not drinking. It's about, what kind of change do I want to affect in my life, and what kind of a difference do I want to make in the world? So yeah, I'm cool with it.
Thanks, John. Oh,
I'm anti-emotional sobriety.
fuck emotional sobriety. What the hell's wrong with you people? Jacqueline, would you like to share?
Yeah, I'm a grateful alcoholic, and I am Jackie. Growing up, my father was a Rosicrucian, and my mother was a non-practicing Catholic. And the Rosicrucians, I'm 78 now, so the Rosicrucians at that time was an organization about philosophies. And they didn't promote themselves, and they didn't advertise. It was sort of word of mouth. And I think there still is an organization, but I think they're in active advertising. It's not the same, put it that way. But I grew up, he had me in the Kindler section, and I would get these letters every week, and he would read them to me. And by the time I was like 4, and I was in a experimental program with 4-year-old kindergarten. So by the time I went in there, I was reading them myself. And there would be little stories about different cultures and different people, and different theories and mythologies and all these things wrapped together. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I was in there till I went off to college. I moved up through the different groups. And fortunately, my parents were both alcoholics also. But fortunately, I found Civil Air Patrol when I was in high school. So I spent all my time down at the airport in Civil Air Patrol. So I stayed sober. But when I went off to college, it all changed. And And then I went into corporate America and I had an expense account. And I was wined and dined, and I wined and dined other people. And that went on for 26 years. And then I went to this conference on healing the earth and world peace. I was before that in spring equinox of '89. I was at a technical conference down in Buenos Aires. And I got a group of us together and we went to Machu Picchu. And I was able to get reservations at the government hotel, which only had about 20 rooms at the time. And we stayed there for 4 days. And full moon, I won't go into all the details, but I had a significant experience at Machu Picchu that when I came back, when I was leaving, I couldn't look at the ruins without crying. I had such a connection. And when I came back, I couldn't look at my pictures without crying. And there was really nobody I could share that with that would understand. But then in January of 1990, that's when I went to a conference on healing the earth and world peace. And I was in a group with Sun Bear. And Grandfather Wallace Black Elk showed up to be part of that group. And the plane was delayed, and I spent about 4 hours at the airport in New York with Sun Bear talking with him. And that ended up starting me on a journey working with Native elders and also Grandmother Troila from the Seneca Nation. And okay, we're going to wrap this up pretty quick. So anyway, I ended up leaving corporate America and following the Red Road. And I've been in AA now for about 15 years. And I knew there had to be a Native group. And a couple months ago, at a conference, one of the Freethinker ones up in, somebody mentioned Variety. And I thought, I'm going to check that out. Well, it turns out it's about 80% Native people. And they have their own big book. It's called The Red Road to Variety. And they have their own meditation book from Native American elders. And they wrap the 12 principles of AA into their interpretation of the 12 steps. And I go to Westside Agnostics every night. And I find that these two groups have put me together. I feel whole now. And so anyway, anybody looking for a Red Road, check out Variety. I pass. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yeah, I've been involved with that for many years, and I also would recommend that for anybody, especially Native people. Nancy from Tusnua.
Yes, I'm Nancy Ann from Tusnua, but I live in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, cool. Hey, Nancy.
And I had to say something because I went to meetings, first at 63rd Street, which was group number 1, and then at Unity on the plaza. And I could never read the Pink Book. I just couldn't do it. I tried and tried. And I didn't really fit in the meetings. I sort of felt like an alien. And I had no idea that there was a secular meeting here in town. So I discovered this because I was housebound and it was a pandemic, and I got onto Zoom, and I've been Zooming all over the place now, trying meetings here and there and everywhere. And I have a wonderful sponsor who is in Ireland, and she and I are trying to work our way through the steps in a secular way. And because she believes that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, I understand that this process is there to help me change and grow. And, I grew up in New York City and went to a school run by the Ethical Culture Society. And from the time I was in first grade through graduation, I had ethics classes. And there were things like that really appealed to me, you know, and I was encouraged to be a thinker and a quester for knowledge. And so coming to Kansas City and winding up in traditional AA was just not my cup of tea. And I had a really hard time staying sober. And I turned 80 July 28th, and just had another first year celebration of sobriety, because after 15 years I went back out and drank for 2 years. So I'm just so pleased to know that you're here in town and doing all those wonderful things. You know, I'm just sorry I didn't realize that anything like that existed right here in good old Kansas City, Missouri. So thank you. I was just so inspired by your talk, and I really like to have heard you. So thank you.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks, Nancy. How about George?
Yeah, how about me? Hi, my name is George, and I'm grateful to be sober today. So great to be here at this meeting. I think a reason why a lot of people are talking over the time limit is because it's such a relief to be able to chat with people that are somewhat like-minded, you know. And you know, a lot of the term spiritual atheist, I don't know what spirituality means, so I really don't know what that word means. You know, I have no idea, you know, but, you know, I thought, you know, I was an atheist before I came into AA 30 years ago. But I thought I was still like a seeker of what spirituality was. And now I've found out that, you know, there's no real, it doesn't mean anything really, you know. I mean, so you can apply a meaning to it, you know. I mean, you know, like helping others or just being kind in general or something like that. But it's just not in my vocabulary anymore, except for to say, what the hell does that word mean, you know? But, you know, when I came in, you know, I was an atheist, yes, but for about 10 years prior to coming in. And, but I tolerated the God stuff because it just really didn't, you know, I said, if you want to believe in God, don't you see how bad the belief in God is? But if you think you need to believe in, and even I thought that, you know, there are a lot of people who would use the word God, but they really didn't believe in it. You know, they would just use it because that's, you know, it kind of make you feel part of the group. And that might be true to some extent. But, you know, so, you know, I mentioned, you know, that I was an atheist a couple times, not making a big deal out of it, but just mentioned, you know, I don't believe in God. And there, some people around me would be like, yeah, that's fine. Don't worry, anything you want to believe in, you know. But, you know, that's not the case, though. You know, I mean, it seems to me that what God, religion is kind of a cover for is this social force that we have to call, that people call their higher power or God, and that I've butt head with for the longest time, even before I came in the rooms of AA, you know. And so I'm going along pretty good in my early sobriety, you know, actually really well in my early sobriety. And I had these weird coincidences happen, you know, that seemed made up or contrived, you know. And then I get poisoned at an AA meeting. I mean, literally poisoned at an AA meeting. I'm going, what the hell is going on here? And, you know, I went to my sponsor, you know, which I was supposed to do, you know, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. And I knew he was lying to me. And I was like going, okay, now what is really going on here? And I've come to the conclusion that there is a social force, it's a controlling agent for the human species that is part and parcel how we evolved as a species. It's much like being in a beehive almost. And I wasn't doing what I was supposed to do, you know, and I didn't. But the thing is, because I didn't know anything about this, I was completely at a loss. And then I found out that no one's going to help me, you know, figure out what's going on here. So, you know, over, you know, many years of suffering, you know, from this thing, you know, just unbelievable suffering. I come to the conclusion that this is a brutal, vicious system of control that controls the human species. It's more about the reproductive process more than anything else, because every species has to furiously reproduce. That's our only job, really, as any species, is to reproduce. So I've become pretty much an outspoken critic of this thing, and it's not appreciated by those who want to control and by this higher power. And so it's been a form of great misery in my life, but but I'm being honest about my experience and what my interpretation of that experience is. And unfortunately, it's not appreciated by some. But anyway, that's enough out of me. It's great being here. Thank you.
Thanks,
you,
George. Appreciate it. Gary.
There, can you hear me, John?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Oh, good. Okay. I wasn't originally going to speak or ask anything until I sent John a question. And one of the things or actually about the only thing that really bothers me about regular AA meetings is the waste of time, the constant readings. And I got sober in New York City, and there's meetings galore there for the wholly religious to the very atheist. And you can always find people who you can relate to in a city like New York or LA or any of the other large cities. But it's this waste of time, absolute waste of time. What you learn in an AA meeting is through someone's life story, through a speaker, through sharing. It seems the longer I've been sober, the longer I've gone to regular AA meetings, the amount of time wasted has grown. I mean, I've actually walked into a meeting 20 minutes late, and they were still involved in a big book reading. And it amazes me, but then at the same time, it doesn't in one way. It's like a lot of people feel they need to go to a meeting, and if they can sit through like 20 or 30 minutes of not really talking about too much of anything, they don't have to worry about having things brought up during the course of the meeting that might be disturbing. It's similar to if you go to a regular AA meeting and they say, well, let's talk about the first step. You can look around the room and everyone's sort of relaxed. But if you say, well, let's talk about how we're dealing with families and the problem through sobriety, all of a sudden you can see the people in the room tense up, they start to sit up in their chairs, and you can see it's the kind of topic that makes a number of people nervous or anxious. So, but in these secular meetings that I've discovered in the past year, the absolute amazing thing about this is that I'm never bored. I don't just view these as meetings. I view them more as like deep discussions. And I really find that just interesting. And I'm grateful to AA for getting me sober, but at the same time, I've never gone to so many meetings like this in over 30 years. I mean, it's almost like I can't get enough of this. And I've told people in the past, I go to a regular AA meeting and I always prepare myself. I always have a newspaper with me and the New York Times crossword puzzles, or Sudoku, but I'm never bored in these meetings. And so I'm beginning to see now in secular meetings, a number of groups are starting to spend time wasting. Let's read the alternative steps. They started to we'll have the Serenity Pledge. Okay, I'm almost finished, John. They have the Serenity Pledge. Let's admit God. Now, a week and a half ago, I'd listened to them. And they said how it works at a meeting. And I thought, Jesus Christ, this is enough. In any case, what do you think of this, John?
I'm just now noticing your question too. And I'm sorry I didn't talk about what the topic really was, the huge variety of experience within the secular AA community, because it is huge. You can take any atheist and compare one to the other, and it's just everyone's got their own experience. And that's true by groups too. I went to a Zoom meeting that was a Freethinkers meeting, and they asked me to read how it works. And I'm like, what? But I read it and I was like choking on the words. But when I finished it, they said, wow, that was an interesting cadence you had when you read how it works. Because I think I read it in a way that it was, I don't know. But yeah, it's weird. I think that just like individual people are in different places in their growth or their understanding of what it is to be a secular person in AA, so are groups. And I think what was natural for me was to replicate what I had been doing, but in a secular way until I kind of grew out of it. The same with my group. But I'm with you on the readings. Too many readings in the beginning kind of is too much. I don't know what I do in my home group right now, but when I was attending those meetings prior to COVID, we just opened with we had a little bit of reading to talk about what the meeting was going to be about, but we just closed by saying thank you for coming. We went straight to the meeting material, the meat of the meeting. So that's what I like too. It's kind of a waste to have to read all that stuff. But then again, I could also go back to the younger me, 20 or 30 years ago or whatever. And I used to hear that how it works read, and it would almost be like meditative. It would almost be like sort of peaceful thing because I heard it said over and over and over again. And I just kind of listened to it without even thinking about what it means. But then once I started thinking about what it means, then I could barely stand and sit in my seat while it was being read. So it's kind of funny. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but I think that it's just that we kind of get used to doing things a certain way, and we just replicate that. But I think eventually over time that people in groups find their own comfort zone and they evolve as they should.
Thanks, John. And thank you so much for being here and giving us your perspective. One of the things I've found, we started our group in 2014 also, and we had several people who were quote unquote believers who were members of the group who just didn't want to hear all the religious stuff that's in the regular meetings. They wanted to just talk about things like that helpful in recovery. And they wanted their religion to be in their church, not in the meeting. So I wonder how many people still do that to this day. That's kind of why we call ours our Free Thinkers meeting rather than Atheists and Agnostics meeting, because, well, we wanted to be inclusive for one thing, but also because we had members who were not atheists or agnostics, but liked our meeting. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I really appreciate it. And a special thanks to Beyond Belief and Joe for providing the space for us to be able to do this, the Zoom space. And also Kat for being our tech person behind the scenes. She does a great job of that. And Dawn for reading for us. And I wanted to mention next, if I remember correctly, is it next Sunday, Joe, that the ICSA will be having another the Glasgow meeting?
Yes, the International Secular Speaker World Tour lands in Glasgow, Scotland. So
is there going to be a translator for that, or are we just going to have
no, everyone's going to be on their own.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Let's see, Freethinkers, our next one will be the last Sunday again, and we're going to have a speaker for that. It'll be Eugene L. from Kinvara, Ireland. He's got 43 years of sobriety, and he's done it all pretty much in traditional AA, and he's a fascinating speaker. I really enjoy him. So please be there with us if you will. And what we typically do with our meeting is we end with the responsibility pledge or declaration or statement or whatever the heck you want to call it, if I can find it. And I can't find it. That's not good. Anyway, if you want to join us for that, you're more than welcome to. And if you know it, and if you don't, that's all right too. Just unmute yourself and we'll have a nice cacophony of chaos. Who's responsible?
I am
I
responsible
responsible.
for anyone,
when anyone,
anywhere,
anyone reaches out for help,
Out
for
to
help.
help.
the hand of AA.
Come out the hand of AA.
Always
And
to
for
be
that,
that I am responsible.
I am
Responsible.
responsible.
Wow, what a great job, you guys.
Wow.
Sparkle up.